preservation of and increased access to the 92nd Street Y Humanities Audio Archives is generously funded by the National Endowment for the Humanities.
Hello, good evening, and welcome to this year's Rothschild Lecture, endowed in memory of Richard and Bessie Rothschild. My name is Susan Engel, and I direct the Adult Division in the Charles Simon Center for Adult Life and Learning, and I want to wish you a very happy first night of Hanukkah. The format this evening will be a discussion with our two very esteemed guests, followed by your questions, followed then by a book selling and signing right adjacent to this hall. It's now my pleasure to introduce our guests this evening. Lynn Sherr, as you know, is correspondent for ABC News 2020. She has also written books on several subjects that she is passionate about and has inspired us to be passionate about these subjects as well. These books include Tall Blondes, a book about giraffes, Failure is Impossible, Susan B. Anthony in Her Own Words, and now comes to discuss with us tonight the amazing true story behind our nation's favorite song, America the Beautiful. Joining her on our stage is Joel Siegel, who, as you all know, is the much-loved film critic and entertainment editor for Good Morning America. He's also the recipient of 6 Emmy Awards, and his unique sense of humor and insight has made him a much sought-after speaker. Please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Lynn Sherr and Joel Siegel on America the Beautiful.
Good evening. Thank you very much. Happy Hanukkah.
Good evening, good evening.
In case you're interested or concerned, Elvis has left the building. And I am here, well, one reason I'm here is to say things about this book that Lynn is probably too embarrassed to say, and to do some reading from it. This is an incredible work about a very static subject that really comes to life. We will be talking, and we will have questions and answers, and we will have, should I tell them, we're going to make them sing at the end of the evening?
You're going to want to sing by the end of the evening. That's what I would say.
Excuse me. The book begins, the introduction. This is a story about hope and dreams and the sure, undiluted patriotism of another era. It's the real-life legend of a gifted young poet from New England who saw her country clearly from a mountaintop in Colorado and turned her vision into timeless verse. It's the unlikely tale of a modest young musician from New Jersey who conceived a melody of uncommon dignity after a splendid day at the seashore. The woman and the man never met, never even communicated, but their soaring creation so seamlessly captured the American spirit, the two would be linked forever in our national heritage. Above all, this is a story about America, America the Beautiful. And then Lynn asks the question, why a biography of a song? Why a biography of a song?
I love this song. I got the idea to do this a little over a year ago, and the truth is, I have always loved America the Beautiful. I have always felt when I sung it that this was the one song that I could sing completely and totally, and there were no lines or no tunes or no notes in it I didn't like. This is the song that's always given me goosebumps and made me feel good, and I wanted to find out why.
And you knew before you wrote the book that you had a very personal connection to
Yes, I do have a personal connection. The author of the poem, the music and the words are written by two different people, and you're going to be hearing all about them. The author of the poem is a woman named Katharine Lee Bates, who was a professor of English and later head of the English department at Wellesley College outside of Boston, which is not only my alma mater, but I'm also a trustee there. Now, I should point out to you that when I was a student at Wellesley, I thought that Katharine Lee Bates was a dormitory. And nothing more. In the course of my research, I discovered that she was indeed an extraordinary woman. So it's been enlightening on many levels for me.
The Katharine Lee Bates story you begin the story at 3 p.m. on a sunny afternoon in June 1893. Katharine Lee Bates boarded a train in Boston to embark on a remarkable journey. What was her life like in 1893? What was life like for women around the world and for women in America in 1893?
Katharine Lee Bates was born in 1859 in Falmouth, Massachusetts, right at the entrance to Cape Cod. And she was born to a family. Her father was a minister, a Congregationalist minister. Her father died a couple of months after she was born, and leaving her mother with 3 small children with no means of support. And in those days, that meant exactly what it means today. But then Mrs. Bates was a lucky woman because she lived in Falmouth, which was a whaling village and a seafaring village. And it was a place where, because the men always went off to sea, the women developed this amazing
network of support.
Right, and so they supported her. Her mom, Katharine's mom, had to take in sewing, all sorts of odd jobs. But as Katharine grew up, it was clear she had a very literary sensibility. And the family made sure she was going to get an education, which was something that was highly unusual for female people in those days.
You have an amazing statistic about the number of women in college in the United States.
By 1875, when Wellesley opened its doors, there were 11,000 women in institutions of higher education in this country. 11,000. And, you know, the thing that always amazes me is that Katharine's mother graduated from Mount Holyoke. She was one of the first graduates of Mount Holyoke, which was one of the very first of the women's colleges. So Katharine was a lucky little girl. She was born to a family that understood about female education. Her mom gave her a diary when she was quite young, and she wrote all sorts of wonderful things in her diary. She was a little budding feminist. She wrote things like, "Why do boys get to play outdoors and girls have to stay inside and sew?" So she knew there were things she was going to change when she got older.
You visited the house she was born in.
I did.
Now, is it a public shrine?
The
Is
house,
it a
the
museum,
house she was born in Falmouth is now a private house, but the Falmouth Historical Society has a lot of her effects, including many of the artifacts from her childhood.
One of the things that amazed me, nearby in Salem, where Louisa May Alcott grew up, and her father was in education, and when Little Women became a huge hit.
As in Concord.
In Concord.
Concord.
Sorry. When Little Women became a huge hit, she made so much money, she decided, being very New Englandish, she was going to just blow it, throw it to the winds, and she put indoor plumbing in her house. She had a sink with a tap so that she didn't have to go out to the wells. So.
Well, times were hard. Times were wonderful in those days in many ways, which I think has a lot to do with our Katharine's sensibilities and why she turned into such a splendid human being. But it was tough, and ultimately her family, her mom moved, wanted to be near her sister, her mother's sister, in a suburb of Boston, which is now known as Wellesley Hills. Moved Katharine there when she was about 12. And as Katharine was growing up, there was this new college starting down the road. Wellesley opened its doors in 1875. Katharine was a member of the second full class to enter. She was known as Katie of the class of 80.
And one thing you quote, the Wellesley rules, quote, "Lights out at 10, gentlemen callers were forbidden, as were cotton underwear and candy."
By the way, you had to wear silk underwear. It didn't mean no underwear at all. I don't know what they were protecting the girls from. You know, it was the most protective environment, including, I was speaking the other day out in Colorado Springs, and a little girl whose teacher had read her parts of the book raised her hand. She said, "I want to know why Katharine wasn't allowed out unescorted while she was in college." This is a little grammar school kid, and it's in the book. The girls were not allowed out of their dormitory after dark unescorted. And the only time Katharine ever left her dormitory after dark while she was a student at Wellesley from 1876 to 1880 was when the entire group was escorted by professors and they were taken 2 by 2 to the greenhouse to see the night blooming Sirius.
What did she study?
She studied English, she studied everything. She studied art, she was a very wonderfully curious and sensitive young girl, and she wanted to learn everything. She had a fabulous education. It was a great time for her.
And on her journey in June 1893,
well,
where did she go?
She graduated from college in 1880. She did some teaching. She now got back to Wellesley. By 1893, Katharine was 33 years old, teaching at Wellesley, and that summer, she was invited by a very progressive fellow who was the president of Colorado College in Colorado Springs to teach summer school out there. He had a 3-week summer school, and he imported professors from the East. That summer, I believe there was somebody from Brown, there was somebody from Yale, somebody else from Wellesley as well. So this was a great adventure. And when she got on that train in 1893 from Boston, imagine a single young woman. She'd been to Europe, by the way. She'd been to Oxford. She had been around the East. She had never been out West. This was a big adventure.
Well, this was also, I don't think Colorado was Colorado was a state in 1883, but Utah was not. This was
uncharted territory
yes.
in the realest sense of the word. So she gets on the train, open to everything, really wanted to absorb the world. Her first stop was Niagara Falls. She saw the roar and the thunder of the falls, was totally taken by it, especially since Niagara Falls was about to be harnessed for hydroelectric power. And to many people, this kind of symbolized the can-do spirit of a nation on the move. Katharine, being an artist, wrote a poem on the spot. She also filed away some impressions for a bigger poem that was coming up. Got back on the train, and the next stop was very important. The next stop was Chicago. And Chicago in 1893 was the site of something that was officially called the World's Columbian Exposition. Unofficially, it was the Chicago World's Fair. I think it's the best World's Fair there's ever been in this country. It was everything grand about America as it was and as it could be. This was America's chance to say, okay, Europe, we may have come from there, but we can do it on our own now. And the culture, it's ours now. It's our century, it's our time, watch us go. There were exhibits of steam engines, dynamos. There were wonderful things and silly things. There was a map of the United States made entirely of pickles. There was also one made entirely of oranges, I think from the state of California. Katharine saw all of this, including the world's first Ferris wheel. Mr. Ferris had invented something to outdo the French, whose Monsieur Eiffel had come up with a giant steel structure at the Paris Exposition, known, of course, the Eiffel Tower. And Mr. Ferris came up with his wheel. The first Ferris wheel was gigantic, 26 stories high. Each car was like a Pullman railroad car, and 60 people fit inside in each car. Katharine took a ride in the Ferris wheel. But the thing that really impressed her...
Yes, there was something, this was urban planning really didn't exist, but it happened first in these spheres. I studied this in history. And the first city, the first urban area lit with electricity was in this World's Fair.
And the electricity, of course, being quite new. And the city that she saw was a kind of at the entrance to the fair, this architectural utopia, 14 buildings in the Beaux-Arts style, still the European style, around a central courtyard. In each building, the facade was a kind of stucco-like, marble-like exterior, painted bright white. And when the incandescent bulbs were on at night, the effect was dazzling, absolutely dazzling. It was called The White City. Katharine wrote another poem right on the spot, but again, filed it away. It was another stone in the mosaic of the greater poem that she was going to write. All these impressions going into her mind.
Well, you have to tell us the line she used. She didn't call it the White City, she called it the...
I'm not going to tell until we get there.
Okay.
Okay, he gave it away.
Oh.
We'll get there. We'll get there.
Okay. Well, we'll get there, and she got to Colorado.
But on the way to Colorado, she gets on the train from Chicago, and now she goes through Kansas. It is 4th of July, 1893. Katharine looks out the window, sees fields of wheat waving in the hot summer wind, glowing in the golden sun. Her heart absolutely gives away. She writes in her diary, "A better American for such a 4th." Files that impression away too. Now she gets to Colorado. After Kansas, gets to Colorado. Here is this child of New England and sees for the first time huge mountains, the Rocky Mountains, which indeed are purple at certain times of day, sees the Red Rock Canyons, sees everything in the area, and she, I think the thing she wrote in her diary was that her store of expletives just gave out. She had no adjectives left. She didn't know what to say.
Well, this is something too that we have to look at history. We have to try to look at history the way people then lived it. And there wasn't any color photography. There wasn't any television. Travel was difficult. And yes, you'd heard that the mountains were tall. The mountains in Massachusetts, they aren't mountains. They are hills compared to the mountains out west. And they knock us out when we see them, and we're prepared for them. She couldn't have been prepared for them.
There was no way. She could not have known anything like this, and she was utterly, utterly overwhelmed. And also,
it's also true of the, excuse me, but it's also true of the fields of wheat. Massachusetts is hilly.
She had never seen fields of wheat.
Kansas is flat.
Kansas is flat, and then to get to Colorado, where it's the flat plains, and Colorado Springs, where she was, had been founded as this kind of paradise for. It was perfect climate. There were a lot of people with tuberculosis there. It was dry air, flat plains, gorgeous mountains.
Something we should do, because we're at the YMHA, one of the first Jewish charities in this country was to set up a tuberculosis hospital in Denver because the air was clear.
Yeah. It was, the whole thing was just a breathtaking experience for her. She loved it. She also had her little problems. They took her touring all over the place. One of the places they took her was Cripple Creek, which she said she got to
She didn't write that song too, did she?
No.
Oh, okay.
Got to over terrible roading. And she said, and there was a cave-in, and they had to spend the night, and the only baggage she had was a volume of Browning.
Was there do you happen to know if there's some cotton underwear in between the pages and the...
You're not going to let that go.
No. And Pikes Peak.
The big mountain that towered over the town is and was Pikes Peak, 3 miles high. Pikes Peak we all know because that was, in fact, those of you who've been out west know this, as you're driving, it really is the first thing you see. And this was the goal for all the pioneers, the gold diggers, the explorers, everybody. And they all wrote Pikes Peak or bust on their wagons because if you could get to Pikes Peak, you'd really made it. A lot of them returned home with the word busted scrolled over their cabins, their wagons, because it really was that tough. But Pikes Peak was right there, towering over the town. At the end of the summer school session, Katharine taught her summer school. At the end of the summer school session, they took the professors on a trip up to the top of Pikes Peak. Katharine went along. They piled into a horse-drawn wagon. On the way up, she noted the beautiful wildflowers, the greenery, the wonderful animals she saw. Halfway up, it got to be more grueling, and they switched to a mule-drawn wagon. And she noted that the vegetation had totally given way, and it was now very desolate, almost a moonscape. And when she got to the top, on the way up, by the way, 2 members of the party fainted in the thin air. Not our Katharine, I should point out. Katharine did fine. But it cut short their trip to the very top, but it was just enough for Katharine. As she put it, her one ecstatic gaze was all she needed. She looked to the east, she saw the glorious plains. She looked to the west, she saw the fulfillment of all the pioneers' dreams. She came down, went to her room in the Antlers Hotel, and then and there wrote down the verses that would become America the Beautiful. Let me read you her way of putting it. It was just amazing. She said, "It was then and there, as I was looking out over the sea-like expanse of fertile country spreading away so far under those ample skies, that the opening lines of the hymn floated into my mind." She never took credit for actually writing it down. She said the lines floated into my mind. They entered into my consciousness. She even referred to the having written it, that it was written down in the little notebook that was traveling with me, as if she had no control over this whatsoever. So she was just so overwhelmed. Every single impression she had developed over the summer just crystallized into this gorgeous poem. And she put it in her little notebook, and then she tucked it away. Perfectionist that she was. Went back home, went back to Wellesley, tidied up her notes, answered her mail, got ready for the fall semester. July 22nd, by the way, was the day she went to the top of the mountain. She got back. We know from her diary, she writes, "Consider my verses disheartening." And so the little verses were just confined to her notebook for another 2 years.
Now, there's a parallel story, because we sing a song, we don't recite the verses. Samuel Augustus Ward, how did you find out about him?
Not easily. Sam Ward was a church organist in Newark at the Grace Episcopal Church, quite a beautiful church that's still standing in Newark on Broad Street. Sam Ward, well, I found out about him because his name is on the music, so I figured, who is this guy? I will tell you, every single known fact about Samuel Augustus Ward is in this book. There is nothing left, absolutely nothing left. I scoured the registers. I went to the Newark Public Library, and I had a lot of help over there. Sam Ward was a church organist, a very modified, dignified Victorian gentleman, a modest, dignified Victorian gentleman, according to everybody. And in 1882, the parallels are just amazing, as you mentioned. 11 years before Katharine took her trip out west, Sam Ward took a trip to a very wonderful American place,
exotic,
as wonderful
far
as
away.
Pikes Peak.
May I quote you? This is his journey, quote, to quote Lynn, one that rivals the journey Katharine Lee Bates made to Colorado in patriotic consequence. Where did he go?
Sam Ward went to Coney Island. Coney Island in 1882, when 33-year-old Sam went there, was in many regards very much an upscale resort. You could go there for the day, you could go there for a week, there were fancy hotels. It was quite a posh place to go. There was a kind of a tacky area, but it was in general quite a beautiful place. And you know how you got to Coney Island in those days?
Practice. No, that's
No.
Carnegie Hall. I'm sorry.
The way that you got to Coney Island was by boat, a paddle wheel steamer. Quite a beautiful way to travel. So Sam went to Coney Island.
And expensive, too. You write that the ticket cost $1, which is equivalent to like $20 today. This is not...
It was, yeah.
No.
Well, Sam, wanted to go to Coney Island, had a good day. Sam had a great day at the beach. We're not sure what happened that day, except what we do know is that on the boat ride home, on the gorgeous paddle wheel steamer home, it was the end of the day. The sun was setting, more sun, more ocean, birds swimming overhead, flying overhead.
You're looking
Swimming
for
would have been interesting.
For
I
page
got it.
48.
I got
Okay.
it. You want to read it? You want
Go
me to read
ahead.
it? Okay. Sam started to hum a tune. He turned to his companion, a man named Harry. And what I'm going to read to you now is what Sam's grandson, a son-in-law, told a reporter 50 years later. "Harry," Sam said to his friend, "if I had something to write on, I'd put down a tune that has just come to me." Harry dug in his pockets. He fumbled through his coat, his trousers, his vest, searching for some paper. Finding none, he took off a starched linen cuff and gave it to his friend, who, leaning on the boat rail, drew a staff and a clef and wrote the melody of America the Beautiful. He's still in my heart. It's such a great story.
But, of course, he didn't call it America the Beautiful,
No.
and he didn't write it for it. What was
No,
it?
it was 1882. America the Beautiful wasn't written. Sam was writing a new setting for a church hymn that was called "Oh Mother Dear Jerusalem." Went back to his church in New Jersey, played
And
it and sung
scans,
it
"Oh,
there.
Mother dear, it scans, exactly.
Yes,
Yeah.
it does go. You want to keep singing? That was good.
No, I don't know.
It works. And it got played in his church and ultimately found its way into one hymnal and then into the Episcopal hymnal. So now there was this new setting for this old hymn with this very wonderful music, which he called Materna. possibly because it was for Oh Mother Dear Jerusalem, possibly for reasons that we don't even know. We know very little about Dear Sam. But so now we have a poem, not yet published, and we have music as a hymn.
Yeah, 500 miles and how many years from merging?
Let's see. Oh, gosh, we're about 20 years away. We're about 25 years away.
How did they meet?
They never met. The poem and the words met.
Yeah, the poem
and the
met.
music met.
The writer and the
right. Okay,
composer
so
never met.
Katharine, let's go back to Katharine. Katharine wrote her poem on the top of, after coming down from Pikes Peak. 1893, did nothing about it. 2 years later, she finally submitted it for publication, and it was published in a little publication, a little newspaper called The Congregationalist, July 4th, 1895. The second the poem was published, people started singing it. Everybody was overwhelmed by the words, by the emotion. They wrote music for it. They took old settings. They took new settings. They just wanted to sing her words. That's how exciting it was. People, in the first 20 years, there were some 75 different melodies to which America the Beautiful was sung.
And none of them
made it.
Now,
would you like to hear any of them? Or
yeah, well, before we get to that, the original title was America.
Original title on July 4th, 1895 was America. The headline here is she revised it twice. She revised it once in 1904, 03, and then in 1911.
The first verse, the original first verse, "O beautiful for halcyon skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountain majesties above the enameled plain. America, America, God shed his grace on thee, till souls wax fair as earth and air, and music-hearted sea."
It's a little ornate, the first version. And the extraordinary thing about Katharine Lee Bates, what an unbelievably generous, wonderful woman she was, what an amazing artist, she said, "When I realized you wanted to sing it, I made it more singable." She changed the words because "Oh Beautiful for Halcyon Skies" doesn't quite make it. And there are a couple of other changes too. But yeah, she changed it over the years.
What are the most significant changes, do you think?
I think halcyon to spacious is very significant. I think also there's just an amazing thing that she did. The third verse, I think, is amazing. She wanted to write this poem, and we'll get, I think a little bit later, we'll talk more about the meaning of the poem, is really a history of America. And one of the things she wanted to do was talk about the battles that had been fought. She was a pacifist. She did not believe in war. She understood that we had had to go through some wars in order to win this country. But the first time she wrote it, it went, this is the third verse of the poem, "O beautiful for glory tale of liberating strife, when once and twice for man's avail men lavished precious life." The new version, the final version that we now sing, instead of "O beautiful for glory tale," it's "O beautiful for heroes proved in liberating strife." Totally understanding that what you need to celebrate is the individuals, not the battles. That we don't want to make the tales glorious. It's what the people did, and it's the people we want to honor. And that, to me, is one of the most beautiful changes she could have possibly made. I really love that part of it. Purple mountain majesties never change. The purple mountains, of course, are the Rockies. Amber waves of grain are, of course, the wheat fields in Kansas. And the alabaster cities, and we'll talk a little bit maybe about them later, but the alabaster cities are the white city of the Chicago World's Fair. This utopian vision of the city of the future.
It's also a constant in American history is the dream of the city on the hill,
yes,
which comes from New England.
Right.
Now, to me, the major change is at the end of the first verse, "Crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea." As a kid growing up in the 50s, the word brotherhood meant something very, very important. As a Jewish kid growing up in the 50s, because it meant this was a place where we were all equal. But as a young woman growing up, it meant something else to you. And what did the kids at Wellesley do?
Well, at Wellesley now, we actually do sing "Crown Thy Good with Sisterhood." And our little fists go shooting into the air when we do it. But you know, she wrote the word, she was thinking of Falmouth. she was thinking of this extraordinary unity of this community she came from, where everybody worked together to make things happen for better, for everybody's betterment. And this line is truly one, I mean, this is one why we love singing this. Crown thy good with brotherhood is just such a wonderful sentiment, that we are all in this together, and particularly in the unity we're dealing with right now in this country, it's very exciting. It's a very exciting line.
There's also something that occurs to me that I have learned as a drama and film critic. It's easier for us to express our emotions through singing them, through song, than it is through speech.
A very wise man said, around the end of the Civil War, when they first started looking for a national anthem in this country, people will sing what they would be shamefaced to say. Mm-hmm. Music is not food for the soul, he said, but wine. It's just a wonderful thought. We are willing to put our emotions into music. I wouldn't walk up to you and say, Joel, oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, But singing it works.
Well, but we still have a melody in Newark, New Jersey.
Okay, how did his music get with her words? So, among the many, many, many melodies that these words were sung to was Sam Ward's tune. How did people find it? This was old news to me. A lot of people went to their hymnals. They looked at the poem. They figured out the meter of the poem, which happens to be 86886, whatever it is.
That's the number of syllables, is 8686.
Yeah. It's called common meter double. And in the hymnal, in the back of hymnals, there's something called a metrical index. And you look under CMD, or common meter double, and they found Sam's tune. Now, I suspect that a lot of people did this on their own. There's no record of how many people actually did it on their own. What I do know is that in 1904, a minister in Rochester, New York, and we know this because he wrote it down and I have the records on that, he actually saw the poem in its second revision, went to the hymnal, put it together, and started singing it that way. And it started to spread from his church. As I say, people all over the country, I think, were doing this on their own. So it was just amazing. All of a sudden, her words, his music, and it all got together. But it was one of only about 75 different melodies that were sung in this country.
You write about you spent an afternoon with Marvin Hamlish, who I guess you had found the sheet music and he was sitting and
yeah, I needed help. I had all this sheet music and I knew, I can read music and I could figure out, but I didn't really know if they were any good. And I called up Marvin Hamlish, who is a mutual friend of ours, and I said, would you help me do this? And Marvin, bless him, said, oh, I'd love to do that. I'm so patriotic. And there for 3.5 hours, Marvin is sitting and playing and singing, right, belting out the songs. And I'm sort of singing along. And he would critique each one. Oh, that one's no good. It's like a barbershop quartet, he would say. Oh, that one's too much like a march. That one's a waltz. No. Oh, that's a nice little phrase. No. He finally said, Sam's is the best. So some of them are interesting, but not great.
And we have on
yes.
tape.
Let me tell you what, we have parts of 3 of them. And I just have to tell you, this is her hometown, Falmouth, celebrates Katharine Lee Bates. You're going to hear the Greater Falmouth, mostly all-male men's chorus. We're just going to very quickly give you, the first one is by a man named Charles Hamilton, who was a music professor at Wellesley, and this was actually the melody that the Wellesley girls sang for many years. Let's hear the first one first.
Beautiful for spacious skies, forever waves of grain.
It's interesting.
For purple mountain majesties above the fruited plain. America.
That's good. Marvin liked that.
It is strong.
That's not good. bed. You be the judge. This was, Katharine, by the way, never said which one she liked best. She felt that the words were her doing. People on their own could decide what the music is. This one is by a man named William Arms Fisher. He was a very well-known Boston composer. We'll just take a listen to part of this one. It's the second verse.
Undemocratic with a small d, which is what's so great about this song.
I think it's pedantic. Couldn't do that one. Couldn't do it. Okay, one more we're gonna play for you now. This one is definitely a march. A little militaristic. Okay, this is John Carroll Randolph. It's the third verse.
Sounds like a Gillette commercial. Wait for Bill Allen to come on and tell you what the Yankees are doing.
The America's not bad. Yeah, that's not sad.
Not bad. One of the things that I love about the melody we sing is that the last two lines, in the three songs we've heard, they sound like a command. But in the melody we sing, we understand that it's not finished. That to please crown thy good with brotherhood.
It's a prayer.
Exactly.
It is definitely a prayer.
Yes.
Katharine Lee Bates understood, and this is one of the things that I just adore about this song. The line that we rarely sing that goes, America, America, God mend thine every flaw. Confirm thy soul and self-control, thy liberty and law. We'll get to those lines in a minute. America, America, God mend thine every flaw. She understood 100 years ago, we're not a perfect country. It's a work in progress. And we're still that way. Mm-hmm. And it's a request for help.
Yeah.
Fix us.
Yeah.
We're going to do what we can, but we need your help. We need somebody's help. And yes, the music reflects that. One of the extraordinary things I think about Sam Ward's music is that it feels as if it was written for the words. Mm-hmm. It is utterly
and not
organic.
The other way around. Yes.
It's as if you turned over a rock, someone said to me, and you found them both there. There is no sense that this music was stuck with these words. It just flows so perfectly.
Well, also one of the things that you write about other melodies that people used, it fits Auld Lang Syne.
It does fit Auld Lang Syne.
Sing that in your head, it fits it perfectly, but of course it's not right.
No, then there are a number of Scottish airs and Irish airs that, of course, we've never heard of.
Although the Star Spangled Banner, the melody we use for the Star Spangled Banner is an old English drinking song.
Right, and there are those who believe that only somebody who was very drunk could hit the notes.
How did the Star Spangled Banner become the national anthem, and when did it become the national anthem?
Well, most people don't realize that we've only had a national anthem since 1931. Mm-hmm. All the time this was going on with Katharine's song, and you know, Katharine's song suddenly became unbelievably famous. People loved it. They loved it with whatever melody they were singing it to. And Sam Ward's actually was sung the most, but it just took off. People sang it everywhere. They adored singing it. So when it came to Congress to determine that we finally actually might want a national anthem, there were petitions on both sides. There was a little America the Beautiful group. There was a Star Spangled Banner group. There was a God Bless America group. There was a My Country 'Tis of Thee group. But of course, the problem with My Country 'Tis of Thee, it's God Save the King or Queen. It's a British song. There was Battle Hymn of the Republic, which of course the South would have nothing to do with.
Right.
There was
Stars and
Yankee
Stripes
Doodle
Forever.
Dandy,
Oh,
which the South would have nothing to do. There was Dixie, which the North would have nothing to do with. So there were lots of different lobbying groups, and Star Spangled Banner won out, I think, because the military was behind it, because Admiral Dewey liked it and was playing it to raise and lower flags in the Navy around the turn of the century. So when it got to Congress, there was a big military push for it. But America the Beautiful had its petitioners as well. But the song was incredibly popular. It was always the song that was sung to celebrate and at times of crisis. It was sung at graduations. It was sung at parties. It was sung to mourn. It was sung for everything. People just loved this song.
And September 11th proves that.
I think it does. Needless to say, I had no idea when I set out to write this book that it would now be ringing out against the catastrophe of September 11th. But I'm not surprised, because not only does this song make us feel good and make us proud, I think that against the carnage at the World Trade Center, against the chasm at the field in Pennsylvania, against the gash in the Pentagon, we were ripped apart. This is a song that makes us whole again. This is a song about a whole land and a whole people and a beautiful land and a magnificent people. And we get to sing about that. And I think it helps us conquer our fears in some ways. I think it gives us strength. It is a poem of boundless optimism. It basically says we can do anything. It's a poem of pure patriotism, but not blind patriotism. Again, God, men, I never flow. And not militaristic. It's not about rockets. It's not about bombs. It's not about hardware. It's not about a battle. It's about people and hope. And it's about some extraordinary things. The verse that, to me, I absolutely can't sing anymore without thinking of September 11th is the third verse, the one we sort of started doing before. Oh, beautiful for heroes proved in liberating strife, who more than self their country loved, and mercy more than life. Those words, who more than self their country loved, and mercy more than life, that's the rescue workers going into the building when everybody else was coming out. That's the folks on United Flight 93 who wouldn't let that plane go into yet another monument and kill a whole lot more people. I think our generation, yours and mine, has come to a renewed understanding that there is something worth dying for, and that is our country.
Exactly.
And I think it might not have been there before for our generation. Different generations.
And it's not just our country, it's what our country means.
Indeed, that there is something a lot more important than our individual lives. And I think that spirit is reflected in this, in the poem and in the music, in the song as a whole. And I think it's one of the reasons we're singing it today.
You quote, well, before we get to that, just you mentioned how popular the song was. Katharine Bates, did she make any money from this song?
This amazingly generous woman, Katharine Lee Bates, never had any money. Well, she had she was a professor. She did fine. She had her teacher's salary. She wrote poems for money. She wrote books for money. She published more than 30 books, poetry, literary criticism. She earned $5 for this poem when it was first published and never took another penny. She said this was her gift to the people because people loved singing it so much. I think she did it because she didn't think she owned it any more than she owned the spacious skies or the purple mountain majesties or the amber ways of grain. She knew she had written something that was bigger than herself.
You quote her, quote, I have come to see that I was its scribe rather than its author. Its singers are its true creators. She
truly makes it sound as if there was a kind of a divine spirit that guided her hand to write it. Now, I don't want to get too sappy about that, but that's part of what she was saying. She was not an observant woman. She had her religious beliefs, but she didn't regularly attend church, or she had a very deep faith, which is of her own making. But I think she did feel that this was sort of divinely inspired.
And she lived to see it become as terribly popular. What about the composer?
She lived long enough so that she died in 1929. It was an immensely popular song. She lived long enough that she got tons of mail every single day. She got letters. She got requests for her autograph. She got requests to write the poem out in longhand, sometimes multiple requests. A guy once wrote and said, I have 5 grandchildren. Would you please write a copy for each of them? She wrote a copy for each of them. She also adopted her family's irreverent nickname for the poem, which was A the Bee.
A the Bee,
A
America
the
the
Bee.
Beautiful. That's
Everything
right.
was A the Bee. Did you, dear brother Arthur, did you hear the A the Bee sung last night? It's very sweet.
And Sam Ward?
Sam, alas, died in 1903, very young. Never had a clue what happened to his melody. Never knew any of this. Also, of course, never made any money. His family never asked for any money from it. His family knew, but Sam never knew anything about it. So here are these 2 people, very modest people, just gave it away to all of us.
Now you quote someone in 1988 during a campaign to try to make America the Beautiful the national anthem. Quote, honestly, wouldn't you rather sing about the beauty of America? Who said that?
Ray Charles. You heard coming in my second favorite. That's Elvis. Elvis does a good America the Beautiful. Ray Charles does, I think, the best America the Beautiful. It's exciting. It's bluesy. He twisted the verses around a little bit. He sort of did it his own way, as only Ray Charles can. But I think it's the definitive version. Yeah.
I remember when the album came out, Abraham Martin and John is another song on the same album. Was right after the assassinations, a few years after the assassinations. Right. And 72,
I think is
I was
the
a
year.
disc jockey at KMET in Los Angeles. And I heard Abraham Martin and John, and I started to cry. And then I heard America the Beautiful, and I was ready to enlist.
I know. I can't sing the song without crying, hear it without crying, all the versions.
But we are going to listen to Ray Charles sing.
All right, you want to hear it now?
Oh, yes, don't you think?
Let's hear a little Ray,
yeah.
Sure. He takes the third verse and sings it first.
In liberating strife, who more than self their country loved, and mercy more than life. America, America, make God thy gold refined, till all success be nobleness, and ever again divine. And you know when I was in
Capitalism right up
school, we used to
there.
sing something like this. Listen
Think of
here.
capitalism.
Oh, beautiful.
Now it goes back to the first verse.
The way we sang it.
Far spacious skies, far amber waves of grain, far purple mountain majesties.
It's Purple Mountain Majesties, by the way.
Over the fruited plain.
He was Elvis.
Well, now wait a minute. I'm talking about America, sweet America.
I love that sweet.
You know, God done shed His grace on thee.
He does this past
He crowned our good. Yes, He did. Heavy brotherhood from sea to sing this.
He believes it ought to be the national anthem, by the way. Ray Charles does.
America. You see, my God, he done shed his grace on thee. You ought to love him for it, because
The story you quote,
crowned
when he was asked if adding the song to his repertoire was his own idea, he said, "Yeah, darling, who else's idea do you think it would be?"
sea to shine, shine and see. Oh, Lord. Oh, Lord. I thank you, Lord.
Whatever song they're
Feel
singing.
free to applaud.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah. The best. The best.
We can take some questions from the audience.
I couldn't follow
Yeah,
that.
no. But
Sure, let's take some
Yeah.
questions. If anybody has some. Little hand
Oh,
shooting up.
lights are up.
Katharine died in 1929. She taught for 40 years at Wellesley. She retired in 1925, continued to live right on the right near the campus, stayed very active. She was not a social activist. She was a poet, but she had her social causes. And she, as I mentioned, was very much a pacifist, really believed in Woodrow Wilson, believed in the League of Nations, and always considered herself a Republican, which barely mattered since, of course, women didn't have the right to vote in those days. But in 1924, she cast her vote for John W. Davis, the Democratic nominee, because he supported the League of Nations. And the New York Times found that so extraordinary, they made a headline out of it. 4 Republican women and Miss Bates of Wellesley vote Democratic. So she was okay. In 1929, she died. And she was buried, she was 59 years old. She was buried, she went back home to Falmouth to be buried. She asked that her body be cremated. And this is a woman who was, shall we say, always a little chunky, and wanted her body cremated, and she wrote instructions for this, and she said of the ashes, "I like to think how light they'll be."
There was a hand here. Yes.
I didn't hear the first. Alas, I did not. I must tell you, I consider myself a really good reporter, and I tried for about 3 months to get Ray Charles, and his guide stood very, very strong guard in front of him. So I actually didn't meet Ray.
I have interviewed Ray Charles.
Joel knows him. I don't.
And I don't know him, but I was told, I was warned before the interview that he was really a tough interview. And he was angry and ornery and all of the things that stars can be. And he was a great interview, and he was warm, and he was wonderful, and he was everything you would hope Ray Charles would be. It's funny listening to that song because we know he has no idea what purple is.
Yes.
Or what spacious skies are. It adds a dimension that makes us feel it even more, I think.
Yeah, I think he obviously feels it in a wonderful way.
Yeah.
And I think it's great. I just think it's the best. And you've noticed, you know, he sang it at the Super Bowl last year, and they bring him in to do it when the America the Beautiful lobby starts screaming that we don't want the Star Spangled Banner again. But I should point out, you know, on this national anthem idea, it's possible to change the national anthem. It's only a law, and it only, as I say, was signed in 1931.
Yeah, which is truly a surprise, because we figured that it's been around since 1812, since it was written.
It's interesting. The first time this country thought it needed a national anthem was right after the Civil War. There was a feeling that we needed something to unite us as a country in music. And as only Americans can do, of course, they held a contest. And they held a contest, and nobody won. But the phrase that emerged from that I truly love, one of the judges, a very distinguished panel of judges, one of whom was Stanford White's father. It's really very cool. Yeah, the architect. Yeah. They said one of the criteria was it should be the national heartbeat set to music. Isn't that nice? I think America the Beautiful is the national
very,
heartbeat
very
set to
close.
music.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some more questions? Yes.
I think it's very significant that as we talk about this tonight, I read in the paper today how the Taliban has banned all music because the essence was that music captures the soul and how important captivating the faith and American beautiful expresses.
Well, it's so much part of our culture. It's so much part of our society. The idea that when you feel good about something, you burst into song. You know, it's yes, it's horrible that everything they did is horrible, and that's one of the particularly horrible things. Somebody was putting down the idea that among the first photographs we saw after Kunduz, the first city was liberated, and then Kabul, was that the Afghanis were going to the stores and buying cassettes and buying videos. I thought it was just fine because I thought it reflected a need for some of that music and a way of expressing yourself. I don't think you have to look at that and say, were we fighting this war so that they could watch Indian movie stars? No, that's not the answer. But yeah, music is important.
Well, music is the most abstract of art forms. It doesn't exist in the corporal world.
Right.
And it goes through your ear to your heart. And this is why a song can express things that a speech cannot express. And music in America, wherever we come from, there's ritualized music. In Northern Europe, music was ritualized for the harvest and for religion. As a Jew, music was ritualized through the religion and through singing to children. In Africa, they sing all the time.
Right. And nothing's written down.
That's right. And nothing is written down. And as Americans, we have incorporated all these traditions.
It's true. It's funny you mentioned, I mean, through the heart, through the ear to the heart is a wonderful phrase, and it's a wonderful way to think about it. But when I was looking up, trying to figure out how people got the words and the music together for this one, I was baffled because, you know, I can't ever think of going to synagogue and seeing words and music written down. I mean, we just know those
That's
melodies,
right.
right? Nothing is written
That's
down.
right.
So this was all new to me, and the idea that there was music in the hymnal that you could actually look up. But I interviewed a man who's president of something called the National Hymn Society, because I wanted to understand about hymns, which are quite beautiful, and this has been called the national hymn. And he said to me, it's just amazing. He said he thought the allure of hymns was one of those left brain, right brain equations where the logic of the text and the art of the music produce, and I quote, moments of cohesion and revelation. In a very real sense, hymns put words in people's mouths, and people are grateful to have the opportunity for their beliefs to be so codified and clarified. And then he went on, it was great, he said, we return to them because they're a moment of stability in times of crisis. And he said, it is worth noting that a remembered hymn is the most portable of all religious things. No external equipment is required. Singing it becomes an almost sacramental experience, a moment of transcendence and timelessness, a source of comfort and strength, which is exactly what you were saying, that we can take this song and many other songs with us, and it makes us strong and it makes us feel good.
We have time for one last question. Yes.
Freeman was another president of Wellesley, which Wellesley does a very bad job about publicizing. I don't know that Wellesley is doing much about it. I'm not doing this for Wellesley. I do it for me, although I see in the audience some of my Wellesley colleagues. But no, I did this because I love it. We do think of America the Beautiful as our song at Wellesley, but the truth is, I bet you think of it as your song too. So, and it is. So we don't take a little a proprietary interest, but we quite a lot up there. I don't know that the college needs to do any more. I mean, I think I did it because the only other book about Katharine Lee Bates out there is a biography of her written by her niece, and long out of print. It's quite a charming biography. But I wanted very much to shed some light on Sam as well, because this would not exist without Katharine's words, but it wouldn't be what it is without his
You
music.
did say shed some light. Were you aware of that? Should we sing this song?
I don't know. Would the folks like to sing it?
Should
I'm
we
always
all
happy
sing?
to sing.
Shall we stand up?
Sure. Would you all like to?
Okay, yeah.
It's become a tradition at my book parties. We keep standing up and singing this song. So.
Now, what key do you sing?
Well, I don't know. Who's musical and wants to start us off? Someone out there's got to be able to do this.
Well, I could do that.
Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountain majesties above the fruited plains. America, America, God shed his grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea.
Bravo. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll see you outside.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening. For more information on the 92nd Street Y, New York, and all of our programs, please visit us at 92ny.org.